Welcome to the secret lab on Tawnos, the Toymaker. We've got ourselves a Simic Beast Bird Creature Commander, which I was not expecting out of the new set, and especially out of Brothers War, but I'm very excited about it, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So we have Tawnos, the Toymaker. We have 3 total mana, green and a blue. Whenever you cast a beast or a bird creature spell, you may copy it, except the copy is an artifact in addition to its other type. So basically, you're going to get, every time you cast a creature, you're going to get a creature token that is an exact copy of that creature. Now, as far as the creativity on a deck like this, you're pretty much wide open on whatever you want to do. Now, if you do hand your deck to somebody, it does need to have some sort of resemblance of beasts or birds in there, because that is what our commander cares about. But as far as the creativity goes, as far as going full-on bird tribal, going just straight beast tribal, a mix of beast and bird tribal, you know, whatever that is, you have full open creativity as far as that goes, but it still needs to have some quantifiable number of beast or bird tokens in there. Now, as far as the support package in here, this is really right in the middle because it kind of depends on what you define as support. You know, there's ways that if you're going full beast tribal, you want to have some beast tribal support in there. If you're going bird tribal, same thing, some bird support tribal. You also want to have some sort of token support, you know, ways to kind of amplify the token production outside of Tawnos. So as far as whatever you deem necessary for a support package, you want to have something in here that supports your core value, because you want that support package to kind of be your commander B for the deck. And as far as timing on a commander like this, this is going to be a early and often commander. There's going to be a very noticeable difference between Tawnos being on the battlefield and not being on the battlefield. So you want Tawnos on the battlefield. Tawnos does cost 5 mana. And so really, you know, in the realm of commander, this is almost a 7 mana commander, because by the time you get Tawnos down, you don't really want to just get the 5 mana, drop Tawnos, and keep your fingers crossed that Tawnos sticks around until your next turn. So you want to have some sort of protection, whether it's Swiftfoot Boots, Lightning Greaves. If you're going to get Tawnos down, maybe have a counterspell backup or have some sort of mono blue protection. Whatever that may be, since this is a very early commander you want to get down as quickly as possible, you want to factor in some sort of protection for your commander. Now, one of the best ways to kickstart your Tawnos deck is by utilizing the Changeling creature type, or the Changeling ability. If you're new to Magic and you don't know what that is, a Changeling is every single creature type within the realm of Magic. So let's take Realmwalker for example. Realmwalker is a bird and a beast token because it is every single Magic creature type. So that's one of the nice ways to where if you are building a mix of creatures, or, you know, if you're building birds and you need a little bit extra support, some of these Changelings can really kind of help smooth out some of these creature bases that you're building for your deck. But especially one of the nice things about Realmwalker is, let's say that you are building a mix of bird and beast tokens, beast cards for your deck. With Realmwalker, you cast it. That enters the battlefield, you're going to name beasts with that, and then when the copy enters the battlefield, you can name birds with that, and that's going to have you covered. So that's one of the nice ways as Realmwalker, you can cover both if you're going for a mixed creature package. Masswood Nexus is going to turn all of your creatures into your deck, all creatures types, and then Morite of the Frost, it's nice to have that Changeling and have it enter the battlefield as a copy of anything out there. With Mass Vandal, this is another good Changeling out there. If you exile a creature card from your graveyard, that's going to give you some artifact and enchantment removal. Bloodline Pretender, same thing with Realmwalker, you have that enter the battlefield. You can name one creature type and then get a +1 counter, and then name an additional creature type with Bloodline Pretender, the you know, let's say birds or whatever, and that's still going to give you that additional bonus. And then with Gladewalker Ritualist, whenever another creature named Gladewater enters the battlefield, draw a card. Now this is going to be every creature type. It is a Changeling, so when that copy enters the battlefield, you get that extra, you know, card draw. But one of the nice things about Gladewalker is that, let's say that you are running some sort of return creatures back to your hand. As you get these tokens on the battlefield, as you get these extra copies of Gladewalker, if you can keep casting Gladewalker and get that card draw going, hey, that's some really good value right there. One of the other things you do want to isolate or really hit on in your Tawnos deck is making some sort of token amplification in your deck. Parallel Lives, Adrix and Nev, and Doubling Season, these are all ways that you can get these down, really kind of increase the amount of tokens that you're producing, because, you know, Tawnos, you want Tawnos to stick around, but more than likely there's going to be some removal on Tawnos at some point. So getting these down really allows you to get as much value as possible out of Tawnos once Tawnos is on the battlefield. One of the other things you may want to look into is kind of utilizing the Populate. So let's say that Tawnos does get removed, the Populate is going to allow you to kind of keep amplifying the existing tokens on the battlefield. With Full Flowering, you're going to be able to populate X times. Second Harvest is going to make a copy of every token that you control. And then with Selesnya Eulogist, you can exile target creature card from a graveyard. It doesn't have to be your graveyard. Then you get to populate. So these are really cheap and effective ways that you can kind of get those extra tokens on the battlefield outside of Parallel Lives and Doubling Season. Now, some of the good kind of baseline tokens stuff you can run in your deck, Fable of Wolf and Owl. This is almost kind of like Commander B for the deck. Let's say something happens to Tawnos. Whenever you get Fable down, whenever you cast a green spell, you get a 2/2 wolf token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, you get a 1/1 bird token. So if something does happen to our commander, being able to get this down, this is still going to give you that extra value. It's not going to be a copy of the birds or beasts that you're running in your deck, but being able to get a token that tags along with a creature spell, it's really nice to run that in there. Now with Combine, creature tokens you control have flying. Most of your birds are going to have flying, but with Combine, this is a wonderful way to make sure those beast tokens have flying. And yeah, it's just a really good card for only 2 mana. And then with Masterful Replication, this isn't the best card out there, but I absolutely love this card, and it slots perfectly into a Tawnos stack. You can create those 3/3 Golem tokens, but for the second part, that's really kind of the money is at. Choose target artifact you control. Each other artifact you control becomes a copy of that artifact until end of turn. So with Tawnos, our creature tokens that we're making copies of, they're going to be artifacts in addition to their other types. So with Masterful Replication, you can use this as a late game finisher to, let's say we've been getting creatures out there, we've been getting those artifact creature tokens out there. Masterful Replication is a wonderful way to turn all of your tokens into one utility creature. Let's say we get Crater Hoof out there, turn all of them into Crater, whatever you want to do. With Masterful Replication, it is a little expensive, but for 6 mana, being able to turn all of your creatures into whatever sort of creature you want off of your board state, it's a great way to help you close the game out or really build a lot of value. So let's take a quick look at some of the beasts that you can run in your Tawnos deck. Now, there are a ton of beasts within the game of Magic. So these are some of my favorite beast cards that you can run in there. This does not cover all of the beasts that are out there, and there's still some good stuff out there. So make sure you take a deep dive when you're looking to what sort of beast to include in here. But these are some of my favorite beasts to include in a Tawnos deck. So we got Rampaging Balos. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a full 4 beast creature token. So let's say that we get an extra copy of it. We got 2 of those on the battlefield. Let's say that we have Parallel Lives on the battlefield too. So we get that land onto the battlefield. That's going to be a landfall trigger from both of those copies. That's going to be 4 full 4 beast creature tokens on the battlefield with Parallel Lives out of there. That's a lot of value. All from just Rampaging Balos and an extra copy of it. We also have Thunderfoot Baloth. That's a really good way to kind of really build up your board's power and toughness, especially if you have 2 of them out there. Cultivator Colossus. It's just really nice to have an XX trample creature sometimes, and especially 2 of them. And then getting 2 copies of Crater Hoof. Whenever you get that +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. That's some good ways to close the game out. You are building Simic, you're getting a lot of creatures out there, and this is definitely a Crater Hoof deck. You want to include it in there. Some of the good utility beasts in here, we've got Manglehorn and Trigon Predator. These are a way to kind of keep the artifacts and enchantments in check with both of these, and having multiple copies of these is a wonderful thing. Same thing with Stomp Howler, that's going to destroy an artifact or enchantment. With Phyrexian Ingester, that is a little bit expensive, but having a double removal for 7 mana and getting that nice +X+Y power toughness bonus, hey, that's nice to include that in there. Some of the value beasts you can run in your deck, we got Hydroid Krasis. I think unfortunately with the copy of Hydroid Krasis, whenever you cast this spell, you get half of that card draw. I'm not sure if that token copy gets that extra card draw, but at the end of the day, getting that card draw from Hydroid Krasis real late in the game, ending up with a flying trample, 8/8, 10/10, whatever that may be, having 2 of those out there, that is a very good thing to do. You also just got the good baseline beast card in Thragtusk. Enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life, and then if you're running any sort of return or bounce style cards in your deck, Thragtusk is going to give you that beast token whenever it leaves the battlefield. You've got a good value play in Elder Gargoth. Enters the battlefield, whenever it attacks or blocks, you get a beast token, you can gain 3 life or draw a card, wherever you may choose. And then Woodland Bellower, that's going to allow you to search your library for some of the lower converted mana cost beasts in your deck. Now, some of the kind of build around beasts you may want to include in your deck, we have Displacer Beast and Displacer Kitten. With Displacer Beast, if you have a way to keep, with that return ability, you can return it to your hand, keep getting those tokens going, and then venturing into the dungeon. So if you almost want to build this Tawnos kind of venture into the dungeon style deck, you can certainly do that with Displacer Beast. There's also Displacer Kitten, which is going to allow you to exile and bounce stuff along the battlefield. There's a lot of lines with the Displacer that allow you to kind of go infinite. I'm not sure if you can go infinite with Tawnos out there, but having multiple copies of Displacer Kitten, being able to exile something, hey, that is a good thing to have. With Species Gorger, at the beginning of your upkeep, you return a creature you control to its owner's hand. There's going to be a lot of times that our commander does cost 5 mana, and you want to roll some of these birds and beast tokens out earlier in the turns just to have some sort of board state. So once you get Frog Beast token, once you get Species Gorger down, that's going to allow you to return these creatures back to your hand, recast them, and if you get to a point where you've got 2 species out there, and you're returning them back to your hand at the beginning of your turn, that's going to, a lot of these are going to be lower converted mana cost birds or beasts, so that's a great way to kind of amplify those tokens and really kind of build some value from there. And then you also have Protean Hulk. I don't know what sort of lines you can go for as far as combo wins with Protean Hulk, but hey, it's in here. If you want to go for a combo win, this is definitely one of the best beasts you can use to kind of combo out. With some of the beast support cards you can run in your deck, we have Crozian Moorchief. Beast spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so it's always nice to have that reducing cost, and you can also protect a lot of your beasts with that 2 mana activation. There's Wirewood Savage. Whenever a beast comes into play, you get to draw a card. We're not going to get an extra copy of that, but with Wirewood, getting that down, and you get 2 beasts that come into play, that's 2 card draw, that's a wonderful way to make sure you keep getting creatures onto the battlefield. Ravenous Baloth is going to allow you to sacrifice your beast to gain 4 life. Not super crucial that you run that, but if you run in, if you're playing against a board wipe heavy meta, being able to sacrifice all of your beasts to gain 4 life before board wipe happens, hey, that's pretty nice to have. And then with Totem Speaker, same thing, whenever a beast comes into play, you get to gain 3 life. So, like I mentioned, you're probably not running a dedicated life gain deck like this, but if you want to have some incremental life gain with Ravenous Baloth and Totem Speaker, hey, that's where it's at. Now with Skyshroud War Beast, I like this beast a lot. It has Trample, and it has power and toughness equal to the number of non-basic lands target opponent controls. So this is one of those cards, it's almost kind of like a Tarmogoyf beast. You get this down and target somebody that has a lot of, maybe a 3-color deck or 4-color deck out there. And as the game goes on, if you have a 6/6, 7/7 trampled creature out there, that's a pretty good beast. Just being able to get it down for 2, and especially if you can return it back to your hand and get that going, that's a pretty high power and toughness for a low converted mana cost. So it's definitely worth it to think about including in your deck. We have Grixis Pack Leader, so whenever a creature enters the battlefield power 3 or greater, we get a card draw. Paleoloth, that's going to allow you to, whenever a creature with power 5 or greater enters the battlefield, you can return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And then with Crozian Groundshaker, target beast gains trample until end of turn. Now, one of the other things that you can include in your deck, is since we are getting a lot of tokens out there and they are artifacts, is you can utilize the Affinity Beast package. That's going to be Arcbound Ravager. You can sacrifice an artifact to get a +1 counter on there. But as the game goes on, you have a lot of these high converted mana cost Affinity Beasts. And all of these tokens, since they're artifacts, they're going to count towards affinity. So let's say we get late in the game, we have at least 6 tokens out there. A Quicksilver Behemoth, that's going to be a 4/5 beast that we can get down for just 1 blue mana. Same thing with Broodstar. If you've got 8 artifacts out there on the battlefield, that's a 2 mana beast token. You get out there and get an extra copy of it, and that's flying. So that's definitely something you want to include in there, because that's one of the downsides to Tawnos, is that you're trying to get it down, have these high converted mana cost threats, but when you have these high converted mana cost threats that care about something like affinity, that's a great way to get your commander down and really kind of spam it out from there. Some of the other good utility beast stuff, you have Curious Herd. You can choose target opponent, create X33 green beast creature tokens where X the number of artifacts that player controls. So that's a really good way to kind of amplify those tokens. You can see if we go for Curious Herd and we have something like Parallel Lives out there, that's a lot of tokens off of that. With Fresh Meat, if somebody goes for a board wipe, you're going to be able to get a 3/3 beast creature token for each creature card put into the graveyard. With Primeval Bounty, so whenever we cast a creature spell, this is kind of like Commander C for the deck. Whenever you cast a creature spell, we get a 3/3 beast token. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we get 3 counters on a creature, and then whenever a land enters the battlefield, we gain 3 life. So this is just, if you're building this Tawnos deck, it's going to be a high mana deck. You want to be able to do a lot of busted things, and including some stuff like Primeval Bounty, where you get some sort of value no matter what you're doing. That's a wonderful way to include that in your deck. And with Azuri's Predation, For each creature your opponents control, put a full 4 beast token onto the battlefield. Each of those beasts fights a different one of those creatures. So with Azuri's Predation, it is very expensive, but there's a lot of times to where you get down Azuri's Predation, you get a lot of beast tokens on the battlefield, you can really clear the board out, and you can really just swing in and take a lot of players out if your Azuri's Predation really cleans up their board state. So that's a really good way to kind of go for a one-sided board wipe, and at the same time really building up your the number of beasts that you have on your side of the battlefield. Now that we have covered the beast that you can run in your Tawnos deck, let's take a quick look at birds. So now birds, if you're trying to decide, should I build a beast deck or should I build a bird deck? I would primarily build a beast deck because a lot of the birds out there, they are nice, they have some nice little incremental value, but there's just not a lot of overwhelming late game value within the birds. But that doesn't mean you can't build a full bird tribal deck, and if you want to do that, go for it. But a lot of these birds, what I would do is I would build, if you're building Tawnos, I would start with a core beast package and then use birds as some of your value pieces, you know, especially late in the game. So some of the good birds out there, and like I mentioned earlier in the video with the beast, there's a lot of birds out there, and I can't cover all the good birds in a video like this, but these are some of my favorite birds. With Ledger Shredder, whenever a player casts their second spell, that's going to be a Conniving, and it's going to get that +1 counter on there, so that's just really nice to have that extra value out there. Mind Streaker, that's a good way to kind of get that activated ability where target player puts the top card of the library, his or her library, into the graveyard, and it gets +X, where X is that card's converted mana cost. And so one of the nice things with Mind Streaker is that, let's say that somebody goes for a tutor, it goes on top of their library. Mind Streaker is a really good way to kind of stop that top of the library effect, so if that's something you want to keep in mind. Nimble Obstructionist, you know, pretty much the money with Nimble is being able to counter a target activated or triggered ability. But being able to flash in a bird and get an extra copy of it, and it be a 3/1 with flying, that's some good stuff right there. With Esor, spells your opponents cast that target one or more commanders you control cost 3 more to cast. And so this is going to be one of the really nice birds to get down early on. It is a legendary creature, so we don't really want an extra copy of it. But once we get this down, then we go for Tawnos. That's going to be some extra protection for Tawnos, which can be very important. Some of the good utility birds, we got Artificer's Assistant. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you get to scry and scurry for 1. That's not going to get the scrying whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, but it's nice to have that incremental value over the course of a game. If you're building some sort of, you know, support deck that goes for +1 counters, or maybe you're running some sort of planeswalkers in here to kind of work with doubling season, Therming Bird, having multiple copies of Therming Bird is a wonderful thing whenever it deals combat damage to a player. You get that proliferate option. Glintless Crane, whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library and grab an artifact from there. And then with Mist Raven, whenever it enters the battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. So with Mist Raven, that's a wonderful way to cast that, return a creature that you want to get a copy of later in the game, and kind of keep that value going with Mist Raven. We also have a Silver Raven enters the battlefield, we get a Scry for 1. Foul Watcher, we get a Surveil for 1. Junk Diver is going to allow you to enters the battlefield, or whenever it's put into the graveyard, return another artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And if I'm correct in this, with Junk Diver, whenever you cast it, you're going to get a copy of it. The artifact copy of Junk Diver, it goes to the graveyard, but it ceased to exist. And so with a copy, a token copy of Junk Diver, you should still be able to bring an artifact from your graveyard to your hand. I could be wrong on that, check with the judge, but I'm pretty sure that even the copy, the token copy of Junk Diver, you still get that return from the graveyard. And then you also have some good value bird like Raven Familiar. It comes into play, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library. That's a wonderful thing to have, you know, late in the game. Let's say you're not really hitting a lot of your good value beasts, getting an extra copy of Raven Familiar where you can look at the top Brainstorm and grab one out of your Brainstorm the top part of your library and grab 1 into your hand. That's a good thing to have. There's also the Owls. You can run Owl package in your deck, enters the battlefield, you're going to scry for 3. Basically, all of these Owls just look at the top card and allow you to scry or put them back in any sort of order. So if your entire creature base is all of these birds, you can see you're lacking a lot of power. You have a lot of advantage with a lot of these birds out there, but you're lacking a lot of that power and that punch. And so if you are building a Tawnos deck, I do recommend, you know, having some beast in there for the late game. But if you want to include some of these in here, because these are good early in the game, and then they're good late in the game if you're casting them in open Tawnos, getting that extra value. So I just don't know how powerful a dedicated bird deck can be, but hey, this is Magic, and there's a lot of things that are possible. Now that we have covered kind of the core bird package in a deck, let's talk about some of the support cards for a dedicated bird deck. So we have Keeper of the Nine Gales. You have the activated ability tap and then tap 2 untapped birds you control, return target permanent to its owner's hand. You can use that to send stuff back to your opponents at the table, or if you want to send something back to your hand to recast and get that extra copy. It's a wonderful bird to have, and you get an extra copy of it, which is a very nice thing to have. With Donald, Herald of Wings, whenever you cast a non-legendary creature spell with flying, you may copy it, except the copy is a 1/1 spirit, and in addition to its other types, you can only do this once each turn. This is not the best card out there, but whenever you cast a flying spell to get an extra copy of it, it's worth including in a deck like this. We have Warden of Evos Isle. Creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast, so it's nice to have that reducer cost. And then with Curiosity Crafter, having 2 copies of this, it is a bird. Whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So one of the nice things about Curiosity Crafter is that's going to include your beast tokens and your bird tokens, or really any token on the battlefield that deals combat damage. So being able to have 2 copies of Curiosity Crafter out there to get that card advantage going into the late game, that is a very good thing to include in your deck. There's also some cards that give us a really nice advantage to creatures that have flying. So creatures you control with flying get +1/+1 with favorable winds. Spirit Noble is going to give them a nice toughness bonus, and then tap for an attack bonus. Gravitational Shift is going to give them an attack bonus, and then without flying, they're going to get a reducing cost on their attack bonus. And then Windstorm Drake, other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0. So if you're building a dedicated bird deck, this is where it's at to make sure that you can make your board state be something that is a threat, something that can close the game out. It is worth kind of considering maybe including it in your deck if you are building more of a beast deck, because if you have the Combine Simic artifact that gives our creature tokens flying, Favorable Wind, Spirit Noble, and Gravitational Shift, they will all turn online as soon as you have that Combine card on the battlefield. So that is something to keep in mind. It may be a little bit situational to get that to happen, but you do want to keep that in mind. Some of the dedicated cards for a bird deck, we've got Airborne Aid, draw a card for each bird in play. I love Commander because you get to dive deep into Magic's history and find cards that work with a specific commander, and Airborne Aid is certainly that. We've got Tide Skimmer. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures with flying, you get some card advantage. That is a Drake, unfortunately. I wish Drake was a bird, but it's a Drake. But it's nice to have that extra card draw whenever they fly. There's Crookcrawl Elder. Tap 2 untapped birds you control, draw a card, then tap 2 untapped wizards you control, target creature gains flying until end of turn. So with Crookclaw, that's just nice to have that on the battlefield. At the end of somebody's turn before you untap, just tap down a lot of birds, go for some card advantage, and you're good to go. With Wind Reader Sphinx, whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. So this is one of the good things to get down late in the game. We have a lot of creatures with flying. They don't have to deal combat damage to get that card draw. So simply just turning them sideways, even if you're attacking into a board state that's going to ruin your board, or you're worried about a board wipe coming, with Wind Reader Sphinx, that's going to be a great way to get some card advantage before something like that happens. One of the other fun things that you can incorporate in your deck building is utilizing the Mutate mechanic. Now, I will be honest, I did not play a lot with Mutate when it came out, and so I don't have the expertise to tell you how it works whenever you're going for the Mutate, getting a copy of it, different things along those lines, so do keep that in mind. But these are the things that you start with if you want to go for the Mutate. We have Gem Razor. Whenever this creature mutates, you get to destroy target artifact or enchantment. With Dreamtail, that's going to give you a card draw whenever it mutates. And then with Sawtusk, whenever it mutates, you get to destroy target non-creature permanent. They get a 3/3 beast token. We have Migratory Greathorn with the Mutate. That's going to allow you to grab a basic land. Trumpeting is going to get you a 3/3 beast token whenever you mutate. And then with Auspicious, whenever it mutates, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile X permanent cards with X the number of times this creature is mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. We also have Souvenir Snatcher. Whenever you go for the Mutate, you get to gain control of target non-creature artifact, which is always nice to have that. There's Parcel Beast that has the activated ability of 1. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into your hand. And then also with Shark Beast, with Pouncing Shore Shark, whenever this creature mutates, you may return target creature opponent controls to its owner's hand. Like I mentioned, a lot of these I just displayed for you. They're birds, they're beasts, they have the mutate option, you're getting multiple copies of them. So this is definitely a way you can take this deck and have a lot of fun with it. If you want to go for a dedicated mutate package, this is kind of about it right here as far as the creatures go. There are some support mutate options in there. There's Polywog. Each creature you control that costs 1 less to cast if it has mutate. Then whenever you cast a creature spell with mutate, draw a card and discard a card. Essence this is going to allow you to get a +1 counter on a creature and you gain 2 life when they mutate. And with the Leviathan, whenever it mutates, tap up to X target creatures with X the number of times this creature has mutated. So there's a lot of fun to get a lot of copies of these on the battlefield. How that interacts with multiple copies and stacking it and mutate, I simply don't know, but this is definitely the card package you want to go with if you're looking for the mutate option for your Tawnos deck. So we have talked about beasts, we've talked about birds. Let's talk about some of the ways you can go for universal value support in your Tawnos deck. And one of the best universal value is going to be generating mana equal to the number of creatures that you control. So we have Guy's Cradle, Circle of Dreams Druid, and the backside of Itlimoc. With Guy's Cradle, this is a very expensive card in paper, but on Magic Online it is fairly reasonable and pretty cheap. So I include this in here for the Magic Online players. If you play paper, talk to your playgroup about having a proxy or a placeholder for Guy's Cradle. It's just, you know, when you get to the, I can't remember how much it is, but I think it might be around $800 or something like that. It's very expensive. It's a fun card. You should be able to play that. So talk to your playgroup about running a proxy on this one. But being able to generate green mana for each creature you control, that is a wonderful effect to have out there. Same thing with Circle the Dreams Druid and Itlimoc. Once again, you know, being able to add green mana for each creature that you control, that's just going to lead to a lot of busted turns. You know, once you get one of these down and you have a lot of creatures out there, you just basically just start churning through your deck, and it is wild. Some of the universal card draw that you include in your deck, we have Shaman Revelation, Distant Melody, and Collective Unconscious. With Revelation, you get to draw a card for each creature that you control. This is a wonderful way to where even if you can't get your commander down, you've got some of your birds and your beast out there already. Revelation is going to allow you to draw in a lot of card draw if you have a lot of creatures out there. And then with Ferocious, that typically doesn't really matter with Revelation, but we are talking about building a beast deck, so there's going to be a lot of times where you get that 4 life gain. So that is something to kind of keep in mind. There's also Distant Melody. You choose a creature type, draw a card for each permanent you control of that card type. And the same thing with Collective Unconscious. Draw a card for each creature that you control. So you don't have to run all of these in here, but it is worth considering running a few of these in here, having some sort of card draw source that cares about the volume of creatures on the battlefield, because you will have a lot of them out there. There's also Golden Ratio. Draw a card for each different power among creatures that you control. If you're building a mix of birds and beasts out there, Golden Ratio is a very cheap way to go for some good card advantage. There's also Winged. Draw a card for each creature with flying that you control. So let's say you are building a bird deck or you've got some good flying creatures out there. That's a good way to generate some card advantage early in the game. And then late in the game, if you go for the cleave option, draw a card for each creature you control at instant speed. So this is a really good card to include in the deck. The only way I wouldn't include it is if you're building a dedicated beast deck and you're not running any sort of birds. But if you have some support birds in there, there may be some times where you go for winged and just go for 3 or 4 card draw. And then if you don't do that late in the game, you can go for the cleave option and really cash that in. So another good creature you can run in there is going to be Tishana. Tishana's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size. Then whenever it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature that you control. If you're running some sort of return option in your deck, Tishana is a wonderful way to go for some card advantage late in the game and refuel. One of the big things about Simic, if you've never built a deck like this where you're trying to get as many creatures on the battlefield as possible, you want to have some sort of high impact card draw in your deck, because you're going to dump your entire hand ramping, you're going to dump your entire hand getting your commander out there, and then trying to cast creatures turn after turn. Eventually you're going to be depleted and you're only going to have a couple cards in your hand. So you want to have some sort of way to completely refill your hand and then really get that Simic value going and really sound those Simic alarms. Outside of generating a ton of mana and going for mass card draw, one of the other ways you do want to incorporate some sort of value in your board state is caring about creatures entering the battlefield. So we've got Path of Discovery and Guardian Project. With Path of the Discovery, that's going to give you the Explore option whenever a creature enters the battlefield, and you get that Explore option on that creature token that tags along. Unfortunately with Guardian Project, you're not going to get that non-token clause in there, but being able to get that nice incremental card draw over the course of the game, that is a very good card to include in a deck like this. With Path of Discovery and Guardian Project, when you're running a high creature count deck, it's really nice to have these in here because they just give you really nice card advantage over the course of the game. With Kindred Discovery, this is going to be a little bit more of a, if you're building a dedicated bird or dedicated tribal deck, because you do have to choose a creature type, but whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, you can draw a card. So, even if you're running, 75% 25% beast and 25% birds, it's still worth it to have it in there. If you're just running like almost like a 50-50 bird beast deck, I would maybe skip it because you're just going to be hit or miss on something that does cost 5 mana. Some other good cards, we have Cream of the Crop. That's going to look at the top card of your library equal to the power of the creature that entered the battlefield, and you get to put that on top, the rest go on the bottom. So with Cream of the Crop, when you're getting a lot of creatures on the battlefield, that is going to be a super quick way to kind of dig through your deck. Elemental, but you don't get that card draw, but being able to just see cards as quickly as you can with Cream of the Crop, it's a very powerful card for how for only costing 2 mana. Elemental Bond, that's going to give us a card draw when power 3 or greater enters the battlefield. And then same thing with Season of Growth, like Cream of the Crop. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you get a scry for 1. Now, this is not the most powerful effect out there, but if you get this down early, you're getting mana dorks out there, you're getting your early converted mana cost birds and beasts out there. Being able to scry every single time a creature enters the battlefield, that is a very, very strong effect over the course of the game. That value does add up with Season of the Growth. There's also Gurk's Uprising, enters the battlefield. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, we get a card draw. That's going to give our creatures trample, which is a very important thing to have. And then whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, we get a card draw. So that's a really nice way to where if you have a beast out there, you can get a card draw as soon as it comes down, gives everybody trample, and then you get more card draw over the course of the game as long as you meet that 4 power toughness requirement. There's also Life Crafter. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a scry for 1. Really nice to have that. And then whenever you cast a creature spell, you can pay green mana if you do draw a card. So we're playing Simic. We're going to be generating a ton of mana with Life Crafter. That's a wonderful way to get that scry at the beginning of your turn and get that card advantage for only 1 green mana. And there's also cards like Greater Good. Sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. If you have a lot of creature tokens out there, and a lot of these beasts do have a high power and toughness, being able to sacrifice a beast token, let's say it's a 5/5 or a 6/6, being able to draw 6 cards and discard 3 cards, so, you are having to discard 3 cards, but you're still getting ahead on card advantage. So something like Greater Good, that's a really good way to kind of dig through, especially if somebody's going for a board wipe. You can sense a board wipe's going to happen sometime soon, or in response to a board wipe. With Greater Good, that's a great way to just draw a high volume of cards and get those cards into the graveyard. Some other good kind of support stuff you do want to include in your deck, some sort of way to return creatures back to your hand to recast them again. There's Snap, that's almost going to, not almost, it is basically a free spell, 2 mana, and then whenever you cast it, you get to untap 2 lands. Now the cool thing with Snap is, let's say that you return a creature back to your hand, we have Guy's Cradle out there. We use Guy's Cradle as part of that mana. We get to untap Guy's Cradle with the snap cost. Now we get to tap and untap some high producing mana lands. That's some good stuff right there. So do keep that in mind if you're running Guy's Cradle in there. There's also some good counter spells, Disappearing Act and Familiar's Ruse. You can counter target spell and return a creature back to your hand. It's a very nice thing to have. Outside of these, we do have Runaway Together, Fading Hope, Depart the Realm. Once again, you just want to have some sort of way to return a creature back to your hand. And one of the nice things about this is you can kind of use this as spot removal. It's not necessarily spot removal in that it's getting rid of the creature, but if somebody spent 5 mana on their turn getting their commander down, you can just go for Depart the Realm for 2 mana, return it back to the hand, deploy some more value out, then you're good to go. So it's nice having these blue instants that return creatures, because you can use them for your creatures, but you can also use them as a tempo play to send your opponent's creatures back to their hands. There's also some kind of modal effects as far as returning creatures back to your hand. We have Simic Charm. This is a really good card for a deck like this. You're going to get a power toughness bonus for your creature, which that's kind of iffy. Permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn, so that's going to protect your entire board state. And then return target creature to its owner's hand. So with Simic Charm, you've got the option to protect your board state or return a creature to your hand. So that's a really good card to put in your deck, even if running birds or beasts. It's a good universal card. And there's also Crystal Shard for 3 mana or a blue mana, and return target creature to its owner's hand unless it pays 1. There's a lot of times where, even if you're not returning your own creatures to your hand with Crystal Shard, if you get down Crystal Shard, and it's almost like a mana tax, they're always going to leave up 1 mana because you have the option to return the creature to their hand unless they pay 1. So if somebody's commander costs 5 mana and you have Crystal Shard out there, they're going to wait until they have 6 mana, because you can just send it back to the hand because they can't pay the 1. So it's nice to kind of have this like threatening weapon on the battlefield with Crystal Shard, and at the same time being able to utilize it for your side of the board state. And there's also just good baseline creatures like Temur Sabertooth. I wish Temur Sabertooth was a beast, that would be so awesome, but it's not. But for 2-mana activation, return another creature you control to its hand. So that's a really cheap way to get this down, have that 2 mana, rinse and repeat, keep casting those creatures and get them out there. So we've covered birds, beasts, universal supports in a deck like this. Now if you are building a dedicated bird deck or a dedicated beast deck, these are some of the best cards out there. So we have Door of Destinies. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on it. Then creatures you control get +1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. So you can see with like Door of Destinies, if you're not just building a straight beast deck, it's a little, you're not going to get the value for your entire board state. So a lot of these cards are mainly meant for something that is dedicated bird or dedicated beast. We have Reflections. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell. So this is a wonderful way to where if you have Reflections down and you have your commander out there, you have Parallel Lives out there, you have Reflections down, you can see where all of a sudden you go for 1 creature spell, you're getting 3 copies of it on the battlefield. That's a lot of value, that's a lot of creatures, that's good to go for. And honestly, with Reflections, this is one of those cards to where even if you're not running a dedicated either or deck, that's still a really good value to where if you're running 75% beast and 25% birds or something like that, it's still good to include in there to kind of get copies of your extra heavy hitters in your deck. There's also Vanquisher's Banner. Choose a creature type, they get +1/+1, then whenever you cast a creature type of the chosen type, you get to go for a card draw. Some of your universal power and toughness creatures, we got Metallic Mimic, same thing, choose a creature type, and then each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1 counter on it off of that chosen type. There's Adaptive Automaton, which is just a universal tribal lord. They're going to get that +1/+1 for whatever tribe you choose. And then there is Coat of Arms. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature in play of the same creature type. So we have 5 birds on the battlefield. Basically, they all get +5/+5 or +4/+4. I can't remember exactly how the math works out, but basically, if you have 10 goblins out or 10 birds out there, they're basically getting +9 or +10. Now, one of the things to keep in mind with Coat of Arms is this is a universal effect. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature in play. So if you're building a dedicated bird deck, Coat of Arms is a wonderful card to include in there because there's just not really a lot of people playing birds out there. If you're playing beasts, you may want to skip on Coat of Arms because there's probably a lot of beasts out there and your opponent's beasts are going to get that bonus. So that is something to keep in mind. If you're building dedicated birds, this is almost a finisher for your bird deck because you're probably not going to run into a lot of collateral damage where everybody else gets that bonus. But it is fun. It is fun. If you get down Coat of Arms trying to figure out what all the creatures on the board are, I mean, even if you're not worried about losing the game because your opponent's beasts have a big power, I mean, it's a fun card to include, and especially if you're building a dedicated bird deck, Coat of Arms is where it's at. There's Herald's Horn, that's going to give you a reduced cost based on your creature type. We have Erd, that's going to give them a nice +2/+2, and you can use that Convoke to get that out pretty quick. And then with Urza's Incubator, that's going to give you, once you choose a creature type, they're going to make those creatures cost 2 less to play. Some of the good kind of universal cards, or at least creature-based cards, we have Steely Resolve. Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. They can't be the target of spells or abilities. So this is a really good way to where even if you're building birds or beasts, get this down for 2, name that creature type. They can't target them. You know, that's going to be a good way to protect your board state for only 2 mana. Stoneforge Masterwork. Quick creature is going to get +1/+1 for each creature that shares a creature type with it. It's kind of like a mini coat of arms that you can wear for one of your creatures. And then Alpha Status. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each creature in play that shares a creature type with it. So with Stoneforge and Alpha Status, you know, these aren't the best cards out there. But if you're running a dedicated tribe deck, being able to get Alpha Status on a beast token that has trample, and next thing you know, they're +15, +16, you know, whatever that may be, because you have a lot of beasts out there. Hey, that's a pretty low investment for only 3 mana to be able to give them that high power of toughness. That's a pretty good thing to have. And last but not least, closers. You want to run some sort of closers in your deck. We got Enrace Forerunners, Pathbreaker Ibex, and Craterhoof Behemoth. Craterhoof Behemoth is a wonderful closer for a deck like this. Whenever it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample, get +X or X the number of creatures you control. And then you get an extra copy of it. So, especially if you have your commander out there, this is a wonderful, wonderful card to run in your deck. Even if you're not running a beast deck and you're running a bird deck, still get Craterhoof in there. You're building a Simic deck that cares about having a high volume of creatures out there. So cards like Craterhoof and Enraged Forerunners, these are wonderful ways to give you some sort of way to close the game out. Pathbreaker Ibex, it is a goat, but whenever it attacks, creatures you control gain trample and get +X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures that you control. So that's a really good way to kind of spread the power out among the rest of your creatures. So you don't have to run all 3 of these in there, but having at least some of these in there to give you some sort of finishing effect is a very good thing to have. Same thing with Overwhelming Stampede, Triumph of the Hordes, and Overrun. When you have a high volume of creatures, being able to just spread that high power and toughness bonus out across your entire board state, it makes it hard for players to not lose the game, and that's what you're trying to do. With Triumph of the Hordes, you don't have to run this in your beast deck if you don't want to, but in your bird deck, with Triumph of the Hordes, giving them all infect and flying, that is a very sneaky way to close the game out. There's going to be a lot of times to where if you go for it, people might, they might be able to stop it, but if you've got a lot of birds out there, they have flying, you might be able to take 2 or 3 players out of the table with Triumph of the Hordes. So if you're building a bird tribal deck, you're going to need all the help that you can get. Toss Triumph of the Hordes in there because it's going to give you a way to kind of close the game out. There's also some unique ways to kind of get some good high power and toughness bonus for your creature base. We have Tribal Force Mage. Whenever it's turned face up, creatures of the type of your choice get +2 and gain trample until end of turn. So you can name birds or beast off of that. Once you leave it, you don't have to name it as soon as you cast it. So if you're building a mixed deck, you can, if you've got more beast out there, you can flip it and name beast, whatever you want. With Biomass Mutation, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX until end of turn. And so this is a really nice Simic card in that you can have a lot of your creatures out there. Let's say you are building a dedicated bird deck with Biomass Mutation. You can swing in, they have flying, and then if you have a lot of mana out there, you can tap down Biomass Mutation and make all of your creatures, 5/5, 6/6, 7/7, however much mana you have. If you're going to dump it into Biomass Mutation, hey, there you go. With Tribal Unity, creatures of the type of your choice get +X until end of turn. Now, these are a little different than Overwhelming Stampede and Overrun. They are instant speed. And one of the nice things about this is you can have some players that are unsuspecting. If you go for Overwhelming Stampede and Overrun, people see that coming, so they're going to start thinking, oh, I'm going to lose the game, I may need to do some certain things before we go to combat. With Biomass Mutation and Tribal Unity, these are things that you can declare at the end of combat once they've declared no blockers. Let's say you send in a couple birds and they're 1/1s, Biomass Mutation and Tribal Unity at the end step, or at least before you deal combat damage, you're good to go. Some other finishers you may want to include in your deck is some sort of ways to animate your land. Let's say there's a board wipe, you're making land drops. Sylvan Awakening, it's going to turn all of your lands into 2/2 elemental creatures with reach, destructible, and haste. They're still lands. So even if your commander's gone, your entire flock of birds is gone, your herd of beasts are gone, if you just have enough mana to somehow go for, something like Overrun and Sylvan Awakening, that's going to allow you to close the game out. You don't have to run all of these land reanimations in your deck, but at least Sylvan Awakening, that is a very high impact spell for only 3 mana, and especially since they have indestructible. You don't even have to think about it. You just send all of your lands in at whoever and then go from there. Same thing with Kamal's Will and Rude Awakening. Once again, you don't have to run all of these in there, but having some sort of way as a last effort to turn all of your lands into creatures to get some sort of closing on the game, it's definitely worth it to include in your deck. And that is going to be it for the deck tech. Get out there, have fun with Tawnos. I guess as far as closing remarks, what I would say is make sure that you do have some sort of way to amplify your token production with Tawnos on the battlefield. Cards like Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, those are very expensive cards, but they are also super high impact. I've built a lot of token decks over the years, and when you get Parallel Lives down, when you get Doubling Season down, it is the amount of value that you generate is just crazy sometimes. So they may be expensive cards. If you're on the fence about buying them, at least proxy them, playtest them, see how powerful they are, and that way once you do see that, if you do want to invest the money in one of those cards, pick them up. But that's going to be one of the best things I can suggest, is making sure you have some sort of ways to amplify your token production. And other than that, have fun with Tawnos. There's a lot of birds out there, there's a lot of beasts that I did not include in this video. So if you have a beast package that you're very excited about, hop in the comments. If it's a bird package that you want to, if it's birds or beasts or a mix of, whatever you're building this deck with, hop in the comments. I like reading this. This is a very fun commander in that it's a powerful commander, but it's also up to the deck builder to make this, you know, wonderful assortment or amalgam of birds and beasts and whatever that may be. So hop in the comments if you've got some sort of way that you're taking this deck that I didn't cover in this video. I'd love to see about it, and you know, it just gives me better insight into the way people build decks. But that's gonna be it for the video. In fact, if you enjoyed the video, hey, like and subscribe.